Well, would you look at that? Isn't it such a weird coincidence that I'm making a video now about a bad adaptation when in just the last video I was talking about another one? And isn't it even weirder still that this is an attempt to take the last video I did over a year ago and make it not terrible? And in a way, I'm adapting my points from before? To be honest, it's a stretch, but stay with me here. And for your information, yes, it is a coincidence. I've actually been planning to try my hand at tackling this movie again ever since the second fairy tale video was completed. Unfortunately, as a content creator, you usually have multiple projects going on at one time. So I read the book and watched the movie, taking extensive notes along the way, but then I saw Butch Hartman was in the news again, and some people already know this channel was basically kickstarted by a Butch Hartman video, so I pretty much had reason to jump back on the bandwagon there. After that, I got the idea to make a video on Mr. Enter, then Demon Slayer, then Mulan 2020, and I began another script I had thought of before, but then I realized I still hadn't redone my old middle school video, so now we're here, talking about this movie almost no one remembers. For anyone out of the loop here, I made a video over a year ago talking about the film adaptation of this book called Middle School: The Worst Years of My Life. The book series is about a kid named Rafe Kachadorian, a regular middle school student, who gets into various escapades while trying to get through life in the most fun way he can think of. It sounds kind of generic on the surface, but the book is surprisingly realistic with a deeper theme that I didn't quite understand as much when I was reading it at 10. Needless to say, I was a huge fan of the book series, even though I didn't get some of the deeper complexities. So when I heard there was a movie adaptation, I was quite excited to see it. As it came and went, I thought it was pretty good. Then a few years later, I got it as a birthday present and rewatched it. That's when I came to understand. Oh, this film it's not good, is it? Some might even say kinda bad. At that moment, 15-year-old Braxton thought with his superb Blue Yeti mic and 2 months experience with Sony Vegas, he'd create a brilliant deconstruction of the film. Since I uploaded it at a time when I had less than 500 subs in May of 2019, almost no one saw it, and rightfully so if you're asking me. Then, after my AVGN versus Nostalgia Critic video got popular, the middle school vid got kind of an uptick and people started watching it. By the time I rewatched the video again and understood no one should have seen it, it had already amassed over 100,000 views. It had become one of my most popular videos at the time, so I was a bit reluctant to unlist it for a while, but after I did, I knew there was still something that could be done. I hadn't nearly gone as in-depth as I wanted to in the old video, and I didn't even read the original book for clarity's sake back then, and spoiler alert, that's gonna play a huge role in why I now kinda hate this film for what it could have been. With all that explained, I'm now gonna give you a comprehensive guide to every reason why I think this film is a bad representation for the entire franchise. And yes, this sounds very similar to the opening of my Mulan video, but you know what? Fuck you. I'm also simultaneously gonna review the book and tell everyone why I think it's great and stands out in comparison to other graphic novels like Big Nate or Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Let's start with the plot. The first middle school book starts with an incredibly simple concept, one so hard to mess up you'd actively have to be trying. Rafe is your average 6th grader who thinks his school life is going to be much more boring than he anticipated, but after going to an assembly listing out all the school's rules, he decides to make a game out of trying to survive middle school by breaking every single one of them by the end of the year. He entitles it Operation Rules Aren't For Everyone, and sets up a point system, rules, and so on. An important thing to mention about this concept is that Rafe decides to do this entirely because he wants to. There isn't any major incentive for him to break the rules beyond wanting to have a fun experience and just not blending into the crowd. To some, this could come off as an unlikable trait, but something we learn as the book goes on is that Rafe isn't a perfect protagonist. He has plenty of flaws when it comes to getting good grades, interacting socially, or expressing himself in normal ways. Something that needs to be understood is that this is the exact kind of thing a middle schooler would do. I knew tons of kids that did crazy shit just for the fun of it, and you probably did as well, and as the book goes on, it shows this isn't the best way for Rafe to express himself. On the surface, Rafe is breaking all of these rules in a goofy manner, and we get to see exaggerated versions of situations through his perspective. But when you look deeper, it reveals there's a sad truth to all of this. When we get scenes of Rafe interacting with other characters besides his friend Leo the Silent, we see how bad his family life kind of is. His mom is constantly working 2 jobs and can't be there for him and his sister as much as they'd need it. She has a manipulative boyfriend that lazes on the couch all day and isn't emotionally there for her. And the fact Rafe only ever talks to Leo most of the time is sad in itself. Spoiling the ending of the book and movie here, Leo is not real. He was Rafe's twin brother when they were both really young, but he died after a few years, so Rafe thought up what Leo would look like if he got to stay around longer. Leo was the only person Rafe could confide in, and over time, he was never really able to make many other long-lasting friendships. Rafe Rafe tried to cover up all this sadness in his life through comedic drawings and his big plan for Operation Rafe, but even as that goes along, it kind of crumbles around him. His mom takes notice of the rule breaking until eventually on her birthday she hears about something he did and runs off to the bathroom. After that, Rafe tries to shape up and get everything back on track, but as he does it, Leo doesn't really like it. It isn't because he's being good and all that, it's because he's conforming to the regular way of thinking and becoming boring in Leo's eyes. The sad thing about this whole change is that Rafe still can't escape his plan. He accidentally lets his notebook get in the hands of Miller the Killer, a bully at school, and Rafe needs to resume his plan to pay to get his notebook back page by page. Other events get him to end up in the principal's office and so on, leading to him being put in lockdown by his parents. At this point, he's lost all of his lives and feels like he's completely failed the plan, but Leo encourages him to pull off the final act he'd been wanting to do for a long time because the plan never really mattered. It was about Rafe expressing himself and not being a boring person. This leads to the cops arresting Rafe, and as he's driven home in a police car, another altercation happens at his house. Bear, the manipulative boyfriend, accidentally pushes Rafe's mom down the stairs after Miller sends photocopies of Rafe's notebook to his house, and the two squabble over if Rafe is just a bad kid or not. After that, Rafe ends up in the principal's office with his mom for fighting Miller, and the idea of expulsion is brought up. But at the last moment, the teacher that connected with Rafe the most, Miss Donatello, has a different option. She sees Rafe's creative potential and pitches an art school to them. Rafe obviously won't go unpunished, but in this case, he'll be able to go to a school that really suits him. Trust me, I've left out a lot of information for later on in the video, but that's the best plot summary I can give. Based on my summary, you can tell this book is a great subversion of the regular trope of, I'm in middle school and life sucks and everything around me sucks, so I'm gonna do some wacky shit. A great detail about the book is that every bad thing that happens to Rafe and others around him is because of actions he decided to take. There are antagonists in the book, with some more or less justified than others, but they usually just take situations Rafe has put himself in and makes them worse. As the reader, you can sympathize with Rafe as a character and some of the hardships he needs to face, but you also understand he's only in the situation because he decided to do shit that would land him in there. I'll get more into characters later, but first we need to talk about how the film fucked everything up. Hold on, just give me a second to get into the right voice for this.
Rafe Kachadorian is a radical artist rule breaker who only has one school left in the country that'll take him and his tubular friend Leo. After the whack stuck-up principal Dwight destroys Rafe's notebook, he decides to get back at him by breaking every rule in Dwight's handbook before the BLAR, a standardized test. With just the help of his totally hip English teacher and classmates, Rafe has to then prove that Dwight set them all up as the culprits to get better test scores. Along the way, Rafe has to deal with his mom's douchebag boyfriend, a love interest, a bully, his smart little sister, and even a dog. Damn, that's gonna hurt in the morning.
And that's the plot of the movie for middle school. It sounds like if you took the basic concept I mentioned at the beginning of the other plot summary and didn't look any further. Like, it's almost as if the writer of this film didn't get the source material at all, or maybe didn't even actually read it. Look, even the original author makes a cameo just to be as passive-aggressive as possible.
Big guy, you had enough sugar.
I mean, who could blame him? I'd be like that too if my book was butchered like this. Yep, fuck off. You're gonna ruin my book and put me in to give a little seal of approval on your piece of dog shit? I don't gotta give a shit in recording. Somebody give me a goddamn drink, Jesus Christ. You gotta love how the film blatantly strays from the source material by framing it as though Rafe is 100% justified in doing what he does because the authority figures tried to suppress him and his creativity. Rafe didn't need a major reason to do what he did. There wasn't any cartoony oppressor that made his life so terrible he just had to retaliate. He was a regular kid at a regular school that expressed himself in a destructive way. There's nothing wrong with that on its own as a concept. The fact the plot is so simplified also irks me because all the nuance from the book is lost. A really clever move I noticed was that Rafe draws his mom's boyfriend Bear as an actual bear because he thinks it's funny. But the one time he chooses to stray from this and draw Bear as an actual person is when he pushes Rafe's mom down the stairs, making Rafe lose any want to try and bring levity to the situation and just see it as it is. In a way, it's a wake-up call of sorts for him to go back down to reality. In the movie, he's just a guy in a tracksuit that's kind of a dick, and in some animated segments he's a bear, that's all. Other than that, the characters in general are majorly changed as well. Starting with our main man Rafe, as I've mentioned before, he's no longer Mr. Average-looking regular student, a defining character trait of Rafe at the start of the book. Instead, he's a troublemaker that probably thinks he's cool for listening to Marilyn Manson that's been kicked out of 2 other schools already in this same year because he was just so radical. Never really got an explanation why he was expelled from all those other schools, but I guess with all he's able to accomplish in this film with little provocation, he was just a ticking time bomb ready to blow up at any moment. Talking further on that notebook, while Rafe did shine more as an actual artist in the books after the first, it was assumed for most of the first book that Leo was drawing the pictures and conveying what he and Rafe felt/saw through them. When we learn Rafe was the one drawing all this art and that Leo was never real, it all makes sense. Rafe, when he wasn't trying to express himself through crazy rule breaking, was drawing in this book all the events going on and bringing Leo to life in his drawings. Near the end of the book, he creates his magnum opus that gets him in trouble with the law, a massive mural on the side of the school wall showing his creativity in a climax of Rafe's character arc of accepting himself. My point is, as the book went, it was clear art played a large role in how Rafe coped with the world and saw things, but it wasn't his entire personality. If Rafe's notebook was destroyed in the first book, he'd have probably just gotten another notebook. To this Rafe, it's so important to him that when it's destroyed, he starts his whole mission to go against Dwight. Assuming this is just a completely different character from the Rafe we all know and loved, he comes off as kind of petty. It's not like he can't draw in another notebook. What, was this his only one? Artists have multiple notebooks full of drawings, I know from experience. The notebook itself wasn't that special either, so Rafe just comes off as a petty kid that goes off on a revenge plot at the drop of a hat. He also got into this whole mess in the first place because he was just drawing in an assembly discreetly, and some kids decided to just snatch it from him and all look at it like some hive mind. Kids don't act this way, and the film makes it so it isn't even Rafe's fault he was caught. It was just these kids not acting like normal kids who wouldn't stop shouting about how #hilarious his drawing was. Rafe does still do things that get him in trouble, and there are still some genuine moments because of what Rafe did with his sister and his mother, but unlike in the book, this film needs a straight up villain to point the finger at and call the bad guy who caused Rafe to do all this, and therefore he's 100% right. It isn't just Rafe causing himself to get into bad situations like in the book, or Rafe overreacting to having a notebook destroyed here. No! This film can't have a protagonist who isn't 100% right, so they have Principal Dwight in the role of the evil, mustache-twirling authority figure that's trying to keep the kids down with his super oppressiveness. To be real here, Andrew Daly playing Principal Dwight is actually entertaining to watch, and he's clearly giving his all for the film. However, him being a villain at all is in itself a problem. In the books, Rafe had his antagonists and people that terrorized him, but there was no evil force trying to mess with him in his everyday life. There wasn't any super oppressive figure stifling him. He was just a kid at a regular middle school that wanted to switch things up. Now in the film, the school is presented as this totalitarian dictatorship with Dwight as glorious leader. While fun in his own right, Dwight is just an exaggerated character of teachers in 90s Sonic the Hedgehog ads. He's portrayed as running his school with an iron fist, he's got an excessive amount of rules, he's overly strict, overly serious, and cares only about standardized testing and keeping his #1 spot. The film tries to justify all that Rafe does by making Dwight look like the bad guy for destroying his book, but even if that's the case, Rafe did end up doing stuff that would warrant being expelled. He broke into the school on at least 5 different times. He tampered with the PA system to make it spout fart noises. Okay, that isn't that serious. But he somehow in a single night was able to cover the entire school in post-it notes with detailed faces and figures on them. He put graffiti all over the school like it was nothing when it was a major event in the book. He steals his mom's boyfriend's credit card, buys a live eel from somewhere, I'm assuming the dark web or some shit, cause no way he got that legitimately, and fills a trophy case with it and other animals. He also randomly fills a room with balls, I guess assuming Dwight or another teacher would go in it. What rule does this even break? I don't know. I'm pretty sure he breaks the law more times than he actually just breaks the school rulebook. Let's see here. Multiple counts of vandalism, endangerment of animals, damaging private property, tampering with safety systems, multiple counts of breaking and entering, and you still want me to think he's in the right for doing all this cause Dwight gave him kind of a hard time on his first day. The film is so desperate to make Dwight the bad guy. Like, after all this shit goes down, he decides to add more rules that are seen as oppressive, and sure, that sucks, but did Rafe honestly believe nothing would happen after he did all that shit? It's like poking a beehive with a stick and being shocked when you get stung. Having basically nothing else on Dwight to make him seem worthy of the villain moniker, they give him a subplot about wanting good test scores, and Rafe's class is bringing them down, so he fabricates evidence and makes it seem like the whole class is at fault to get them suspended. Rafe has this whole scene of trying to confess to Dwight, but he doesn't want to accept it and keep it secret, so Rafe sets off the fire alarm, making it shoot out color instead of water, and Dwight expects expels him. Are we supposed to feel bad for Rafe here? I mean, yeah, it's bad that Dwight framed people and fired a teacher to try and improve his test scores. Obviously, he should get his job taken for that. But Rafe took safety equipment and tampered with it to shoot paint instead of regular water. What if there was an actual emergency? Hello, 911, help! A fire broke out and all these kids are colorfully burning to death. Rafe deserves to be expelled for that one. Also, speaking of that teacher, I actually don't remember his name, but he's a character, so I'm gonna talk about him. You're probably wondering who he replaced, and it's pretty obvious if you read the book. He's supposed to be Miss Donatello. Miss Donatello was the English teacher and detention monitor, so she spent a lot of time with Rafe. She was the one that understood him the most in the book, and was the person to discover he had an artistic talent. At the end of the book, she's also the one who proposes Rafe should go to art school, so yeah, she was a pretty cool character. They replaced her with Mr. Hip Teacher. He's so cool, he puts Future and Drake in his lesson plans, and he sticks up for Rafe when he's bullied by another kid. He's only in a few scenes and shows up at the very end to help get Dwight fired, but that's about all there is to his character. He never really forms that much of a bond with Rafe, unlike Donatello. I mean, he tries to kinda, but there are so few scenes of it that it really doesn't matter whatsoever. No, that role would go to the love interest for the film, Jeannie Galetta. Out of all the characters in the book, she was butchered the worst of all. Originally, Jeannie was a popular kid. She was studious and good looking, and pretty much everyone loved and listened to her. In the movie, she's a geek that runs the AV club, and no one claps for her speech except for Rafe. She's also the one that makes Rafe's pranking spree go viral on Facebook, because Gen Zers use Facebook, and after helping give Rafe some advice that shows Dwight did some framing and everything is sorted out, she kisses him and they live happily ever after. The book explicitly made it so this did not happen. Rafe had a crush on Jeannie, but for the longest time she barely knew who he was, and though she did become friends with him later on, it was never in a romantic way at all. There's actually this great bit in the book where Jeannie tells Rafe he might be held back a grade instead of what he was expecting to be a confession, and he freaks out in the bathroom, and she follows him in to try and talk. Unfortunately, Vice Principal Ida Stricker was nearby and saw Jeannie in the boys' bathroom, so she got detention, but Rafe didn't for being a boy in the boys' bathroom, and to try and remedy this and get the punishment he feels he deserves for dragging Jeannie into this, Rafe makes a fool of himself and gets detention as well. He still ultimately hurts Jeannie and feels bad about it, but it's implied she forgives him. It's a bit that shows Rafe does care if he entangles people in his rule-breaking web, and even if he gets in more trouble in the process, he's willing to try and get what's coming to him. It also shows Jeannie was willing to get in trouble if it meant helping someone out. We never really get these character-defining moments that break beyond her base level in this film. She's just Miss Geeky Tech Girl that only Rafe understands, and is generally just a much more forgettable character. While I'm on the subject of Rafe's ensemble cast, let me tell you about Rafe's family, and also kinda family. Leo is perfectly fine in the film. He serves his purpose as the sort of wingman to Rafe, but there's one fatal flaw. I think the film would have been much better if Leo talked as scarcely as possible. Remember, his name is Leo the Silent, but he ain't that silent in this movie. In fact, he talks quite a bit. Maybe a little too much, in fact. The film could easily have made his character more interesting by having him speak mostly in his movements or expressions, or they could have just adapted the book and made it seem like Leo was drawing everything to express himself in the situation. The filmmakers also didn't factor in some of the scenes where Rafe is talking to Leo, since they can be in crowded spaces like a school hallway where people can see him, so why don't they call out the fact that Rafe is talking to nothing? These complaints don't ruin him or anything, but the lack of speaking was kind of a missed opportunity if you ask me. Georgia is also okay. Her actress isn't always great, but she's a kid, and as far as that goes, she gives a fine performance. The mom doesn't have as much room to speak, though. Lauren Graham, I'm sorry, what happened? She's not a bad actress, but in this film, she's just really bad at delivering her lines sometimes. This is probably the director's fault. I'm sorry, Lauren, maybe you'll get a better role next time. Last kind of family member to talk about is Bear, and I just sort of feel like he wasn't portrayed the right way. In the book, he was manipulative, but he was manipulative in the way that he was a slob who didn't go to work and manipulated Rafe's mom's feelings. He's still a slob in this film, but he's just your average douchebag now. The original Bear didn't work, so Jules had to pull double shifts and could never see her children, and therefore they'd be stuck with him a lot. This Bear openly flirts with other women, cares about his car, and is so upfront about his douchiness you gotta wonder why Jules puts up with him. If you can get what I'm saying, they're both bad stepdad slash boyfriend to your mom tropes, but Bear in the books is just a bit more realistic. The straw that breaks the camel's back is also all wrong too. Originally, he pushes her down the stairs and she hurts her hand, leading to an ambulance being called and the kids going in a police car. In the film, Bear notices his incredibly expensive car is missing before he notices that Georgia is gone, and the mom is pissed at him for it. I get they were going for the whole materialistic route with him, but to be fair, he said he had over 100 payments left on that car, meaning that if he lost it, he would have to spend a lot of time in poverty trying to pay it off. And if I had a car like that and it was jacked, you'd best believe I'd be a little more than pissed, but no, he's the bad man. We, as the audience, know he's a bad character, but it should have taken a completely different scenario to really get Jules to open her eyes. I guess this film is too lighthearted for domestic abuse, but they could have still handled it better. I already mentioned that the book had the subtlety to change Bear from an anthropomorphic bear to a human when shit hit the fan in the book, but the film is almost entirely live action, so this moment never happens. The last antagonist of sorts I've yet to mention is Miller, Rafe's sort of bully, and that's because he's barely in it. I loved the book portrayal of Miller because he acted like an actual bully. He wasn't just a dumb guy that messed with Rafe at any time. He would wait to attack Rafe at a moment where Miller knew he would not be hounded by teachers. He showed a level of strategy in his bullying. Like, for instance, when he gets Rafe's notebook and finds all his plans, Miller decides to make Rafe pay to get it back page by page under the threat of revealing it to everyone. When Rafe gets all the pages back, you think that'll be the end, but Miller continues to torment Rafe by having made photocopies of the notebook and sending it to Rafe's mom, leading to the confrontation she and Bear had that led to the push. That's what a real bully would do. Miller showed the foresight to copy everything in the book, he got a profit by making Rafe pay for it back, and then he threw it back in Rafe's face by showing it to the one person he didn't want to see. It's perfect. What is this Miller like? Well, he has no intimidation factor at all, he's about the same height as Rafe, and it doesn't sound like he's even hit puberty yet. You gotta admit, it was kinda poor casting to get the voice of Gumball to be the big bully character. As far as actions, he tries to bully Rafe next to a teacher as if he isn't there, he trips Rafe and calls him Cachadorkian, and then the end of the film happens and they're cool now. I'm not exaggerating, that's all they do with him outside of the small animations of the film. While I'm on the animation, I hate how it was used in the film. If I can give the movie some credit, it does have the advantage of really fluid animation. Considering the budget is only $7 million, this is impressive. I just wish they did something good with it. All of the animated sequences are used for either one-off jokes or segments that bring the film to a screeching halt. In the beginning, there was a mix of 2D and live action, and I really liked that. They could have done much more of that. The entire Bear issue I mentioned could be fixed if he was done as a 2D bear until the end, where Rafe's mom breaks it off. They could have done that for all the antagonists, and I'm sure it would have given the film a cool, distinguishable look akin to Roger Rabbit, but the animations usually come straight out of nowhere and are gone just as quick. The one scene I think is done well to actually represent something is when Rafe is freaking out about all the new rules Dwight is throwing at the school. It has some creative imagery, and there's actually a point to the sequence that captures what the book was trying to do, but other than that, the animation is just used for what? Bear going after some random bartender woman and changing Rafe's hairstyle, Miller giving Rafe various wedgies, a pointless chase scene with Dwight and Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite as a janitor, a fucking food chain. Seriously? They actually animated a food chain that has nothing to do with the film, has no relation to any events in the film, and is never again brought up in the film? Sometimes I just wish it could get to the point instead of wasting animation money for these pointless scenes. It's agitating. There is still one thing more annoying though, and that's the pandering. Oh my god, this film tries so hard to pander. It's the most 2016 film I've ever seen. It goes down to the art style of the animated segments. It's not a bad art style or anything, but something about it just screams 2016. The book had rough characters with less detailed features and more curves to accentuate that these are being drawn by a middle schooler, but now it just looks kind of generic and too clean. In the soundtrack, it starts with Cake by the Ocean. It's got Welcome to My House, classic, Can't Hold Us, I Can Make Your Hands Clap. I guess I can see where the tiny budget went with all the licensed music. Forget this film trying to be timeless, they needed to slip in all those references to Call of Duty, Facebook, memes, Game of Thrones, the Kardashians, and who could forget the hilarious scene where the modern age kid tries to use a VCR. Oh, Gen Zers and their lack of knowledge about the past. Go read a book, you uneducated swines. I'm not saying you can't do references in films, but it has to have a certain class to it if you want it to not seem forced. I actually watched 8th grade once before I saw this film, and it did referencing correctly. In the only pop culture related moment in the movie, while the main character is having a sort of date, the Szechuan sauce reference from Rick and Morty comes up, but it isn't as much much for a joke as it is just them talking in conversation, and it's naturally brought up. I kind of cringed at the scene, but I did so because it was so accurate to what me and my friends actually did in 8th grade. It was natural and worked very well. Kids don't just randomly start making jokes about Call of Duty because haha, I learned swear words from it. That's such a 2012 joke. But seriously, beyond the super artificial stuff, the entire movie screams, how do you do, fellow kids? It's about a rebel trying to overthrow the oppressive school system by using super colorful pranks and graffiti that the grown-ups just don't understand. I've heard this shit a million times, and every writer that thinks they're being unique for doing this needs to get off their high horse and understand every middle schooler has thought of this kind of story in the 90s when everyone had already done it in the 70s. The rebel against the authority figure still works as a storyline, but there needs to be more goddamn diversity for it to not feel like a rehash of the same film 20 years ago. Overall, what do I have to say? It's bad on its own, and it's terrible as an adaptation of the book. I'm glad I decided to look at it because it was fun to take apart, but hopefully I won't ever have to watch this film again. I was honestly expecting more from the director of such films as Paul Blart and Dr. Dolittle 2. Who knows? Maybe I'll check out the next film he made. Nope, never mind. I'm done with this guy. Fuck you all. Thanks for watching. Bye. I'm not looking at anything else by this guy. Goodbye.